When the 16-bit classic The Revenge of Shinobi was released, it was a perfectly timed sequel to the arcade original that helped boost the reputation and library of the Sega Genesis early in its life. In Japan, it had been known as the Super Shinobi, and it was easily one of my favorite games on the platform. It was announced that a sequel was coming in 1992. Previews were showing up all over gaming magazines, and there had even been a few reviews. Something was wrong, however. Despite the previews and pictures everywhere, no game showed up. In fact, it completely disappeared. Sega had been unhappy with the progress of the game, and instead of releasing it, they brought it back in and spent a lot more time cleaning things up, working on the stage design, and tightening up the gameplay. It wouldn't be until July 1993 when the final version of the Super Shinobi 2 showed up in Japan. Had Sega's decision to work a bit longer turned this into the masterpiece they had wanted, or did it still fall flat and miss the mark? In this episode, we will be looking at Shinobi 3: Return of the Ninja Master, one of my favorite games for the Sega Genesis. Shinobi 3 had admittedly big shoes to fill when it finally showed up. The Revenge of Shinobi had already established a quality and expectation for the series that wouldn't simply let an average game do. Shinobi 3 needed to be nothing short of spectacular to satisfy ravenous Sega fans, and this had been the reason why Sega continued development to make sure it reached the lofty expectations of series veterans. The thing that I really loved about the Shinobi games was the way that it set you up to understand the gameplay with an excellent first level. You'll find the same design theory here as well. Stage 1 is a learning experience start to finish. Nothing here is going to challenge you, only teach you. The enemies are slow, predictable, and set up in the perfect spots for you to terrorize with your newfound skills. So easy is the opening act, most Revenge of Shinobi vets should be able to take it without a single hit. While this level of ease would normally be seen as a negative in a game like this was simply the developer's way of showing you all the new moves at your disposal. You had the normal melee and ranged attacks of the previous games, but now you have a new jump kick and dash attacks, as well as the ability to block anytime you want. You also have new abilities like hanging from ceilings, pipes, and ropes, as well as wall jumping to get to previously unreachable areas. By making the first stage all about the ease of access of learning your new ninja abilities, this game sets you up well to deal with the difficulties ahead. Even the boss of the stage is little more than a training exercise for your timing and magic. There are 4 ninjitsu available: a lightning shield that absorbs a few hits of damage, a fire attack that hits everything on the screen, an increase in jumping ability, and finally a self-sacrifice attack that takes one of your men but restores you to full life upon your return. With stage 1 down, it's time to mix things up a bit, and you start out on horseback here. While the feel of movement has changed a bit, you still have most of the same moves as before. You can throw your knives, jump, and even attack in the air like your jump kicks. This gives you great potential to defend yourself, and you are gonna need it. Enemies first begin to come at you from the background. They start running across the screen there and reappearing in front of you and behind you. Take your time, learn your best positioning, and don't be afraid to be aggressive here. The second half of this area is a small lead up to an elevator section. Use your block liberally and jump attacks where needed. Once on the elevator, you'll be attacked by guys on the various platforms as you come to them, as well as be confronted with places you'll need to move and jump to avoid being crushed. Act fast, keep up with the elevator, and if you are having trouble, Pop the lightning shield to help you out until you recognize where the dangers are coming from. The boss of this area is a flying robot that has erratic movement, bombs that split into shrapnel, and he can confuse you by reversing your controls. Avoid him the best you can, and if you have it, drop those fire dragons on him to weaken him up a bit. You should be able to beat him down without too much trouble. Stage 3 starts out in a lab that is creating biological weapons. Here you will encounter all sorts of weirdness for the Shinobi universe. Sludge monsters are slow and deliberate, but the flying brains can come out of nowhere and lay cheap hits on you until you learn where and when they will attack. There's no immediate danger of insta-deaths quite yet, so take your time and pay attention to where these guys pop out. Things get a bit more challenging later in the stage when you are faced with some conveyor belts that have electrical charges circling them. A missed jump here can spell doom for you. It's a good area to practice your timing on more difficult jumps. Remember, not every challenging jump in the game needs to be a double jump. You can often get to where you need to be with simple positioning and timing of your regular jump being far more important. The second half of the stage puts you into a den of a monster mutant stalking you in the background. He is constantly trying to lock onto you and blast you, so you'll need to stay away from the crosshairs trying to find you. Enemies here are quite benign and don't really offer much in the way of challenge. The real danger is the stage itself, as it kinda sticks to you when you touch it, messing with your jumps and speed. Stay wary of the guy in the back and you should be fine. Once through, you'll need to fight the guy that was after you in the previous stage, or at least part of him. His head pops out and he has 3 main attacks. The first is a series of projectiles he throws, the second his giant hand, and finally he has a laser that does big damage and can't be blocked. The easiest way to beat this guy is to use your lightning shield and unload on him as much as possible before you lose it. Jump over that hand that keeps popping out and try and keep the damage coming. Stage 4 starts out with you on a hoverboard streaking across the ocean. The gameplay here very much resembles the feel of the horseback stage, with enemies again coming at you from the background. Much of this can be telegraphed and dealt with easily, particularly if you leverage your jump attacks into the mix when an enemy approaches you from behind. There is a mid-boss that shows up, so keep aggressive and keep those attacks coming. He has some bombs that come out, and if you hang too far back, they're harder to avoid. Move a bit closer to easily avoid them. The second half of this stage offers up your first real challenge and marks a turn that sees the game start to get significantly more difficult. There is lots of potential here for quick hole deaths, so you'll need to pay close attention to your positioning and the surrounding dangers. Most of this area is a maze of piping that you need to navigate to get to the end. Pressing up when jumping near a pipe will cause our shinobi to grab onto it, but he can easily be knocked off by enemy attacks. Scroll the screen with care and be acutely aware of enemies that just love to pop up out of nowhere. If you are new to this game, don't be ashamed to use your lightning shield in the tougher sections until you become more familiar with enemy placements and patterns. That's what it's there for after all. The boss of this area can be a nightmare unless you dispatch him quickly. His multiple forms become increasingly aggressive, and many of his attacks can be hard to avoid. Attack his main gun when he first pops out, and watch out for the missiles that track you. From there you need to avoid an attack as best you can, watching out for his main attack that does big damage. It's slow though, and can be easily avoided. Stage 5 allows you to show off all that great skill you have acquired blocking enemy attacks. Here is a refinery area that has a burning forest all around it. It's fairly flat and is mainly just enemies with guns and projectiles placed in your path. You'll need to block a lot, jump a lot, and use your jump kick where necessary. The oil containers you jump on do explode, so be sure to keep moving after you touch one. The mini-boss you face just moves back and forth and waits for a chance to blast you. This can be hard to avoid, but you can also block it effectively. Light him up until he falls. The second area here is extremely long and is incredibly challenging the first few times you play it. It's separated by multiple sections of maze-like platforming that actually requires you to explode the bombs to remove obstacles along the way. You need to be careful because you can actually trap yourself in situations that are really hard to get out of, and you can even blow out the platform you are standing on for an insta-death. Move slowly and study how each bomb will affect your path because there is a load of potential for whole deaths. The stage boss is Mechagodzilla, keeping up the theme from Revenge of Shinobi. You need to keep your attacks aimed at his neck area and avoid his plasma shots. If you get here without ninjitsu, be aggressive and don't be afraid to get in his face and unload. The sixth stage has potential to be a nightmare for those that have yet mastered the double jump. The first part of it is entirely composed of nothing but falling rocks that you need to jump on to keep from falling to your death. A missed jump or a hit from an enemy and straight to your death you'll go. You'll want to jump early and stay ahead of the rocks to give yourself plenty of time to recover from a mistake. You're gonna eat some deaths here until you become familiar with it, but keep at it. There is a mid-boss, but fortunately, he is far easier than the stage itself. Stay on the corner rocks to avoid being knocked into the hole and keep the attacks right on top of him. The second part of the stage puts you in a maze area similar to the final level in Revenge of Shinobi. Here you'll need to not just avoid the spikes, traps, and enemies, but also figure out the correct doors you'll need to enter to find the exit. Lots of trial and error here for sure, so use that ninjitsu where needed until you know the way. Some of the jumps here are particularly frustrating, so your lightning shield can be of great help. The boss of the area is similar to Revenge of Shinobi's final boss as well. He likes to play hide and seek behind doors, and has a false image of himself to draw your fire. Keep those attacks coming and use your ninjitsu if your life gets too low. It's time to assault the final stage, the flagship of the evil Neves. Our hero starts out climbing his way onto the ship, an area that has you hanging below the belly of this giant behemoth. Get hit here and it will more than likely mean a quick death. Most of these jumps do not need to be made with the double jump. Positioning is what's really important and you can use your regular jump. Once past that, you'll enter an elevator-like portion of the stage that takes you to the top of the ship. Try to hit as many of the gun placements and robots as possible in a single leap to stay ahead of their attacks. Once on the upper level, the large gun blast can be blocked and easily dealt with. Move down the spine of the ship, destroy the guns, and make your way to the final and most difficult test of the game. This area is brutal to those that face it for the very first time. Your jumping skills will be tested here to the extreme. There are electrified areas all over the place that take precious life. There are also blind jumps and falls all over the place, leaving you gun-shy and second-guessing your next move. Then there are the platforms you need to stay with in order to survive. Miss a jump, fall behind, or get hit at a bad time, and straight in the hole your ass goes. Nothing less than good old-fashioned patience, trial and error, and practice will get you through this nightmare. Use your lightning shield in the most troublesome areas until you understand where you need to be. Timing becomes everything on this stage, so any lag added because of emulation or a modern display is likely to add to its difficulty. The final boss is actually a bit of a pushover compared to what you just went through. If you make it to him with ninjitsu intact and powered up, you'll rip this dude a new one. Even if you don't have ninjitsu, as long as you have a bit of health, you'll burn this guy down with aggressive attacks and staying right on top of him. No joke, give this guy no breathing room and keep those attacks coming. He will fall before your ninja might in no time. As you play more Shinobi 3, you will start to learn to finesse the stages and enemies better and more efficiently. You'll begin to recognize where all the enemies are coming from and master your double jumps and find hidden extra ninjitsu. Before you know it, you'll be crushing the majority of the game without a lot of deaths and even beat it on the harder settings. Hell, years ago I even took it down without using any of the throwing knives. Shinobi 3 was a game that was expertly crafted and designed, born from the principles learned in the arcade and expanded upon into something truly challenging and special at home. It was an evolution of gameplay that had always been fun, but now so well fleshed out that it towered above other action games in the genre. It also happened to be one of the best looking and sounding games on the platform, with tons of great parallax scrolling, large bosses, and a soundtrack that just kept on giving. Most Sega fans know this game well, but if you have somehow managed to miss it, I hope this little strategic trip down memory lane motivates you to try it. It's Sega at its best, a mix of arcade know-how and the ever-evolving complexity of home console games. Quite bluntly, it's one of the best games ever made. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.